All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going over the online PDF textbook, AppInventor2, Create Your Own Android Apps by Wilbur, Abelson, Spertus, and Looney. So far, we've gone through the first 9 chapters. We've done a Hello Per, Paint Pot, Mole Mash, No Texting While Driving, Ladybug Chase, Map Tour, Android Where's My Car, President's Quiz, and we just finished the xylophone. So we're going to start the MakeQuizTakeQuiz, which is Chapter 10. But before we do, I just wanted you to see that indeed the xylophone program does work, because I guess I didn't play it before we finished, but let me just do a little. And when I click play, and reset does the resetting. Okay, so far as I can tell, everything looks good. So we're going to go into Chapter 10 now, which is MakeQuizTakeQuiz. And as it says, in many ways what we're going to do is we're going to customize the President's Quiz that we did in Chapter 8. Why? Because right now there's only 3 questions. You can add questions, but there's really no way to modify them, etc. And as the author says here, there's no way for parents, teachers, etc. to create their own quizzes or change the quiz questions. So in this chapter, as mentioned right here, we'll build a MakeQuiz app that lets a teacher, whoever that teacher may be, it could be a parent, could be anybody, create quizzes using an input form. Quiz questions and answers are stored in a web database so that students can access a separate TakeQuiz app and take the test. While building these 2 apps, we make another leap, as it says. We learn how to create apps with user-generated data that's shared across apps. Now, that idea of sharing stuff across apps is going to be very important as we go on. Okay, so here's an example. We enter a question and an answer, and we click Submit. As it says, parents can create fun trivia games, you can create math blasters, etc. But here, as I mentioned before, this chapter builds on the President's Quiz in Chapter 8. We'll design 2 apps, MakeQuiz for the teacher, and that's figure 10.1. I don't know why they have that figure. And TakeQuiz for the student, which appears similar to the President's Quiz. The behaviors we're trying to code for this first app: the user types questions and answers in an input form. The question-answer pairs are displayed. The quiz questions and answers are stored in a web database. So that's for the MakeQuiz. For the TakeQuiz, as it says, you'll create TakeQuiz to work similarly to the President's Quiz that we built previously. We'll use that President's Quiz app as a starting point. All right. TakeQuiz will differ in that the questions asked will be those entered from the database via MakeQuiz that we do first. So, the President's Quiz is an example of an app with static data. No matter how many times you take the quiz, though, you always had the same 3 and then later 4 questions. They were hard-coded into the app. All right? But as it says here, you want to ideally work with dynamic data, meaning the data can change over time. Often this information is user-generated. The app allows users to enter, modify, and share information. With MakeQuiz and TakeQuiz, you'll learn how to build an app that handles shared, user-generated data. Now think about how important that is. If you were teaching at a grade school or a high school, something could happen during the evening, and the teacher could write up a quiz that could be used the next day. As mentioned there, we have completed the xylophone app in Chapter 9, so we have been introduced to dynamic lists. In that app, the musical notes that we played, if you remember, I just showed it to you, were recorded in lists. Apps with such generated data are typically more complex, and the blocks are more abstract. Again, we don't want to rely on predefined static data. So this tutorial covers the following 4 elements. Input forms for allowing the user to enter information. Using an index list along with a for each loop to display items from multiple lists. The for each allows you to make your way through a list, also known as iterating your way through a list. we want to talk about persistent list data. MakeQuiz will save the quiz questions and answers to a web database. TakeQuiz will load them in from that same database. Finally, data sharing. As it says, you'll store the data in a web database using TinyWebDB, and that's an important concept. It says instead of TinyDB. The difference between TinyWebDB and TinyDB, when we use TinyDB before, we're talking about saving information to just one machine. With TinyWebDB, we can save stuff over the internet so that it can be used by multiple people. All right, so we want to connect to App Inventor, create a new project that's called MakeQuiz. All right, so let's projects, start new project, MakeQuiz, okay. And again, this one will be called MakeQuiz. So we will set the title to MakeQuiz. And you see it's set, good. As it says, using the component designer to create the interface, use the component designer to create the interface for MakeQuiz. So we've gotten to the point now, all right, where hopefully at least you're pretty comfortable with what's going on. So what are we going to have? We're going to have a table arrangement with a label and a text box, a label and a text box, a submit button, another label, and TinyWebDB. Okay, so let's go ahead and start doing that. So again, we want to start with a table arrangement. So we'll drag that in. As you can see, we have 2 rows, and each row has 2 columns. So we specified that in there, two columns, 2 rows. It's already set. So it sounds like what we want to do here is we want to put in a label, followed by a text box, followed by a label, followed by a text box. And is that right? Text box, label. Okay, they don't like it like the way that I've done it here. Let me get rid of all right, so we've got label. Trying to do it as much as the way they did it here. And text box. Like I'm showing you right now, it's so easy to mess this up. Text box. Text box. I think that's all correct now. All right, we want to, they don't ask us to even change the name of these labels, but this should say question and this should say answer. So this first one, why don't we call it label question, even though they don't. And we'll set the text to question. And we'll call this second one label answer. And we'll set the text to answer. All right. And the text box should be question text and answer text. So this one will be question text. Nothing inside. This one will be answer text. With again, nothing inside. All right, so we're getting there. Then we want a submit button, 2 labels, and a TinyWebDB. the submit button should be called submit button with the word submit on it. As we have done in several times, let's set the width to fill the parent. Let's set the font size to about 20. Let's bold it. Okay, that's looking good. And in fact, while we're doing this, why don't we set our table arrangement to also have a width of fill parent. All right. And let's take the question and we'll set the width of that. Let's make them about even. So we'll set this to 48%. And we'll also set here, we'll set let's set this to 48%. Whoop, that was wrong one. That wasn't the height I wanted to do. That was the width I wanted to do. All right, we'll do the same thing here. In fact, we're going to cut this down in just a minute now that I'm looking at it. Doesn't seem to make real much sense when all we have in here is the word question and the word answer to make them that big. All right, so let's go to question and let's set the width. Instead of 48%, let's make it about 25%. And let's come in here for the width here, and we'll make that 25% as well. All right, so both 25, good. Let's bold these. That's plenty big. Why don't we set the text alignment to be right so it butts up right against it there. Again, I'm doing things right now that are just more or less aesthetic in nature. So let's set, now we'll set the width to fill parent. And we'll set the width here to fill parent. Not sure why that isn't moving over. That's fill parent. All right, I'm going to take for granted that that's going to work its way out, and that'll be okay in just a couple minutes. All right, we've got submit. And we want another label, it looks like here. I don't know what that is. And then the questions answer label. I'm not sure which label is which here, so I'm going to put here quiz questions and answers. We'll make that label 3. So we're putting another label here that says quiz questions and answers. All right, we will again set the width of that to fill the parent. We will set the font size on that to be 20. We will bold it, and we will make sure that it's centered. All right. And it looks like, I'm not going to give that a name right now. Look, and I'm going to drag another label out here that we're not going to see. Okay, I think that's everything. Not sure the questions answer label. I think that's this one, but I'm not sure. All right, it should look pretty much the way that it does in the book right now. And we want to bring out from our storage, we want to bring out a TinyWebDB, which is going to be in our non-visible components down here. So we now have our interface built, and I guess I could have looked here, so we're going to do that, but let's check our time. I'm at 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop now, pick it up here in just a couple minutes.